Good morning, everyone. This is Anthony Butler. I'm the president of Can Do Ideas and the creator of Primal Storytelling. I appreciate you taking the time to learn more about this system, and I hope it's as useful for you as it's been for us. And if you stick around to the end of the webinar, I will tell you how you can get some free tools to help you write your brand story. Okay, well, let's get started. Brands are facing an online dilemma. There's more than 1.5 billion websites in the world, and the amount of content being uploaded is growing exponentially. Getting found online is harder than ever. If you were to start today and begin watching YouTube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 49 and a half years, you would just barely watch all of the new videos that are uploaded today. And it's not getting any easier. And Google has changed things dramatically over the last year and a half. They realized that most web pages they indexed, even from authoritative websites, were not super valuable. And they've introduced a new concept, and it's called content clusters. If you haven't heard of it, a content cluster, it has two parts. It's a main page that is an in-depth look at an idea. To use us as an example, we have a pillar page around primal storytelling. But it could be about anything. The pillar page is just the main idea page, whether you're a bank or you're selling something that you created or a service, it doesn't matter. It's whatever that main service is. And then the second part is there's a number of supporting pages with crosslinks to and from the pillar page. It's like a planet with moons that revolve around it. So the question is, what does a brand do to cut through the noise online and engage with their target audience? And how does SEO and pillar pages and content clusters, how does this all come together? When I look at online content, it never ceases to amaze me how many businesses are doing an awful job at it. The second part of primal storytelling is the storytelling portion. They're regurgitating whatever industry news is happening that day on social media and writing a never-ending stream of listicles that are 400 to 700 words. None of the content has any real value. There's no insights, there's no real thought or imagination put into the content. It's just content for content's sake. And I see it over and over again. What brands are missing from their content marketing is storytelling, which is a shame. Storytelling has been around since the dawn of time. Since humans could first speak, they've been telling big fish stories and hunting stories. You guys have all heard those before. If you look at a cross-section of extraordinary content that has gone viral or is at least getting good engagement, you'll almost always find a story at the heart of it. Stories get more engagement because they're closer to what makes us uniquely human than just about anything else that we do. So why don't more brands use storytelling? I think it's because they don't know how. They don't have a solid process and business structure to create great brand stories and content, and so they end up defaulting to publishing data and information that's dry and breaks the number one rule of marketing. Don't be boring. And that's how primal storytelling got started. I spent years studying what makes content perform, and it finally dawned on me. The more closely we tie stories to human emotion and primal urges, and what's important to what we call tribe, the better the content will perform. So let's talk about the story process itself. Tribe plus story plus urges and emotion equals a primal story. And I'm going to dig into this so that hopefully it'll make sense for you. And then we'll talk about the viability quotient. The concept of primal storytelling, it's an intersection of two different ideas. There's certain emotions and instinctual urges, social tendencies that help explain human behavior. They're what make us human. Modern humans are not very different from our ancient ancestors. Our technology has improved, but we still have the same emotional makeup and urges that we had 70,000 years ago. And we are still ruled by the same emotions, the same instinctual urges, and what we call tribe, which is really, it's about socialization and our need to be social. The University of Stanford, they identified 27 distinct emotions and mix of emotions, but we know through human experience there are more than just the 27. We're emotional creatures, and decisions are made with emotion first and then justified with logic. And identifying important emotions ahead of time can help inform your content. I think it's one of the most overlooked strategies during the content creation process is what emotions are you going to touch on? Primal urges, they're a little different than emotions. They're the vestiges of what most people would think of as instincts, but they're not what scientists consider pure instinct anymore, because humans have free will and the ability to ignore and override their urges. As an example, geese fly south for the winter. They can't suddenly decide to fly east or west or take a vacation in Hawaii. They have to fly south. The same with bears hibernating in the winter, or beavers building dams, and every other genetically encoded behavior we see in the animal kingdom. Tribe, as the way we think of it within the primal storytelling structure, is a bit different than most people might think. Most marketers are familiar with the idea of a target market, or if you're familiar with inbound marketing, the idea of a target persona. With Tribe, we take both of these concepts and we go a little farther. We look for not just the demographics of a group, like their title and their age, maybe their gender. We look into their psychographic makeup and what uniquely identifies them as a group. A tribe is any social construct that unites a group through demographic or psychographic connections. How's that for a scholarly sentence? The second part of primal storytelling, the first part is the primal part, the urges, the emotions, and tribe. The second part is the storytelling. Nearly all stories follow a small number of structures. They have just like you learned in high school English, story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But then it also has a narrative voice, characters, and a plot. And that's the portion that most brands get wrong. They forget about narrative. They forget about having real characters within their stories, and then the plot itself. And what we're talking about is creating a story arc that pulls your target audiences in as part of the story. You take a narrative voice and a place within the story yourself, your brand does, and then you tell a series of adventures for them, and that's your content. The last part of primal storytelling methodology, the virability quotient, it's a measure that we designed to help us understand how well we're doing with content. We rate each area of this primal storytelling formula on a scale of 1 to 5, and we give it a score. The higher the score, the more likely the content will achieve liftoff. It's far from perfect, but it works, and it's been a good gauge to understand if a piece is moving in the right direction. So let's get into the actual formula itself and the steps you need to take to apply to your brand story. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat below. At the end, I'll pick 2 or 3 questions, just depending on time, and we'll try to get them answered. My hope is that you can leave this webinar, download the Primal Storytelling worksheets, go through the process, and just begin building your story. If nothing else, I want to start a revolution in content so that businesses can tell better stories, so that, if for nothing else, business content will be less boring. And I read a lot of websites and I'm just appalled and bored most of the time. So let's get started. So step 1, you're going to define the tribe. And as I talked about earlier, you're going to start out with demographics. Who are they as people? And what do they have in common? From a psychographic standpoint, what we mean by that is, what are those invisible things that unites them? What are their fears? What are their interests? What are their motivations? If you're a B2B brand, you have to stop thinking about your target market by their industry or the types of companies and start thinking of the individuals within those companies who make the decisions. If purchases are made by a committee, which in some big companies they often are, you're going to define each type of committee member and then put them into and define that tribe. Okay, it's not one size fits all, and for B2B, that especially that are making team sales, it matters. You have to have language for everybody. So then, once you start to understand the tribe, and I put language down as an example because there's lots of micro tribes, and some of them have their own slang, and their own way of speaking. As an example, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been training for almost 20 years, and in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu there are a lot of very Jiu-Jitsu specific ideas and concepts. There's a lot of slang, a lot of fight terminology, very, very distinct group. Every group is going to have something like that, and you just need to find out what it is and then understand it. You're going to incorporate that into your stories. Okay? Moving on, step 2. This is where we're going to first start talking about the distinguishing traits of a story, and that's the narrative point of view. For brand storytellers, we are creating a story arc where our customers and potential customers are taking part in the story itself. We're going to position ourselves as a character in the overall story arc. Like when I say ourselves, I mean our brand. And then invite them to take part in the story. There's 5 main narrative archetypes for nonfiction storytellers, and I've listed them here. I'm going to go through each one and just give you just a quick example of what they might mean, although they are pretty self-explanatory in general, and how each of them can play a positive role in your content creation. You've encountered all the different archetypes, whether you're aware of it or not, reading in fiction, So let's get started. The first one is one of the most often used archetypes, and it's the mentor. You're trying to help someone learn something new, acquire a new skill, to become more than they are now. Obi-Wan Kenobi was Luke Skywalker's mentor during Star Wars, as was Yoda. Brands will often act as mentors with their clients and help them grow. I'm positioning Can-Do Ideas, myself, Primal Storytelling, as mentors to brands to tell their story, to get that story out in the world and connect with audiences. It's a positioning portion. Second archetype is the ally. Allies are different than a mentor in that they are helping someone accomplish something, a specific goal, or they're going to provide assistance, they're going to provide resources, knowledge, and often they'll do the work for them. A lot of professional services companies position themselves as allies. Think lawyers, accountants, and engineers of all types. A lot of marketing companies, myself included, we position ourselves as an ally. We can help your marketing department write their stories. In some cases, we write the stories for you. But I think the thing to remember is that you're going to ally with your customers and tell stories that reflect that position. Okay? Third is the hero. It's a little different in that you're positioning the brand as the hero and taking the audience on the journey with you. I see this a lot in luxury brands such as Rolex. They position Rolex as the main character. If you had a service, the service itself could be the main character, could be the main focus, and the audience is the supporting cast. I'll give you a good example. Dos Equis commercials with the most interesting man in the world. The Dos Equis guy, he's the hero in that storyline. And what they're trying to do is, by association, they're saying that if you drink Dos Equis, you too will be more interesting. And you too can grow a fabulous beard. Next is the herald. Historically, heralds were the messengers and diplomats of kings. They would discuss the future and how to improve it. In modern times, heralds are often future-focused and trying to help people understand why adopting a new technology of some kind is beneficial. Many startups assume the herald role in their brand story. If done well, it can be a powerful position that creates great stories. One really big example right now is Elon Musk. He's positioning Tesla as a herald. He's painting this amazing picture of a world with self-driving electric cars that help restore the ecosystem. Very powerful story. It really rings with a lot of people. It definitely works. There's lots of those kinds of stories in the marketplace already. And finally, this last one is royalty. It's an odd archetype. Only a small number of brands utilize this kind of archetype. In ancient times, kings and queens filled the role that our modern day celebrities fill. They were idealized in literature and art, and every action and word was scrutinized. Today we have celebrities who fill the same role. They do the same thing. We have luxury brands that convey exclusivity, wealth, power, and I think most of all, it's one of the most defining traits is they convey status. They're status symbols. One of the best examples right now is Kendall Jenner. She's an example of an artful use of the royalty archetype. She's connected with audiences to increase sales. By all reports, her company sold hundreds of millions of dollars of cosmetics, leveraging just her Instagram and Twitter accounts. If you scan through her Instagram account and you just think royalty, I think the first thing that jumps out at you is that she's completely painted herself as a modern day fairy tale princess. You can argue whether or not she really is or not. It actually doesn't matter because the perception that millions of people have is that she is. The secret is choose one or more of the archetypes and tell your story using that perspective. You're going to pull the target tribe into that story using that point of view. But first you need to create a story arc. So a story arc, what is it? In fiction, there's a number of different kinds of story arcs, maybe an unlimited number. But for brand storytellers, there's only 5 that you're going to be using on a regular basis. You can certainly use more than one plot for different parts of your sales cycle, but just choose one or a couple and let them help you maintain your structure. Tell the story using a format that just makes it easy to tell the stories. It makes it easier for people to consume. Many of these structures you'll recognize from literature and movies. They follow similar patterns. Okay, so the first one, you all know this exact structure, whether you realize it or not. It's rags to riches, where someone rises up from humble circumstances to overcome the odds and accomplish something extraordinary. Riches are figurative. It can be that they rise up to achieve success of some kind. Rocky Balboa just lasts 10 rounds with the champion. He doesn't even win. He actually loses the fight, but it's still a win for him because of where he came from. And for brand marketers, rags to riches, this can often be the founder's story, or the scrappy underdog story who's fighting the evil empire, or the evil big competitor with all the resources and talent. It's about overcoming the odds. In the early days, Steve Jobs and Apple, they pitted Apple against Microsoft, and they cast themselves as this rags to riches story, whether they really were or not. Great use of storytelling. They also use life's journey, but we'll talk about that another time. Next is overcoming the problem. And this is one of the most common story arcs because businesses, and especially service businesses, we solve problems. We're using it with Primal Storytelling. Brands have a problem creating content that connects. Primal Storytelling and all that it has to offer is a great solution to that problem. Is it perfect or one size fits all? No, but it's a great solution and methodology for them. Next up is life's journey. It's not about a destination, goal, or solving an individual issue. It's about the trip itself. Life will happen and the journey is the point. We'll see some luxury brands using this, destinations such as Hawaii and Jamaican Island vacation advertisers use this type of storyline. I see Subaru, a little bit of Audi also use it in their advertising. And they're really just trying to bring you on the journey and put you into that journey so that once you identify with how it would feel, that it helps bring you into their story. Very powerful when cleverly done. Next is the quest. It's one of the easiest for people who are new to storytelling to understand because nearly every superhero movie makes use of it. There's a big goal with many obstacles to overcome for the hero and his allies. Think the Avengers, they're trying to overcome Thanos, killing half the universe with the snap of his fingers. But for brands, it could be anything difficult. As an example, universities will sometimes position the quest for education as an epic goal that only they can help a student fulfill. Again, using Elon Musk as a different example, he's more than one company. SpaceX, he has positioned SpaceX using the quest. This incredible idea, let's colonize Mars in order to ensure the survival of the human species in the event Earth comes uninhabitable. It's a storyline that, whether or not it's true or not, whether or not they'll ever come close to achieving that goal, it captures the imagination and it's really, really done well in the marketplace. And it's helped him go from no one's even heard of him to building this amazing company, which is pumping out billions of dollars in revenue right now. And it all started with a really well done story. And finally, the last one, and the one that I'm going to caution you about using, is solving the mystery. Humans are naturally curious, and solving mysteries is one of our favorite things to do, and learning secrets is one of our favorite things to do. And there's a reason there's been so many spin-offs of CSI. Positioning a brand as holding the secret answer is a common tactic. We could have positioned Primal Storytelling using solving the mystery, but I wanted to be very careful about avoiding the perception of hype or some sort of clickbaity type techniques. But if well done, solving the mystery can be a powerful story arc. You'll see this almost every day in clickbait ads, where they'll give you partial information, the most beautiful celebrity in the world who's now lost her looks. And you're like wondering, well, who is it? If you click that link, it's some BS, but a lot of times you still click it. Clickbait works because we have a natural tendency just to want to know certain things. And the closer it's tied to a person's individual interest, the more likely they are to connect. Okay, so next step 4. And this is where we're going to go back to the primal portion of storytelling methodology. You have an understanding of creating the story and what the narrative archetypes and story arcs might be helpful. Now we got to, as we're putting together the framework, we have to choose some emotions and urges that you're going to tie into your storyline and your arc. And it's going to help you connect with your audience and add power to it, to the story. A story without some sort of emotion is just information. It's not going to sway anyone because you have to connect first. We're talking about those emotions that you know about. Happiness, sadness, fear, anger, nostalgia. There's more than 30 of them. And then you're probably less familiar with the urges themselves. So this follows kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We did a lot of research when we came up with these and debated which ones to include and which ones not. But these are the main ones. And the first 6 in here are all about self-preservation and perpetuation of the human species. So food, clothing, shelter, safety, protection, and sex. That's what keeps us alive. It's what helps keep others alive. And then the last 3 are very internal. They're very mind-focused. So curiosity, significance, and the last one, spirituality. And We don't have an enormous amount of time. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I think you can read more on our website if you want to really get the details, but I'm just going to go through this quickly. Food, clothing, shelter, personal safety, you're familiar with it. But protection is a little bit different. It's the urge that you have to protect members of your tribe, to protect your family. You know, there's few things more ferocious than a mother protecting her children. She'll do nearly anything to guard them from danger. There's tons of stories out there about, little women just going crazy and fighting off attackers and lifting cars, and they call it hysterical strength, just trying to protect people. It's a real urge that you have, and if you can bring protection into a marketing storyline, it can be a very powerful driver. The sixth one, sex, we all know what that is. It's more than just ensuring the survival of the species. It's sexuality in the broader sense. And nearly any product can be sold and advertised using sensuality in some way. Even chewing gum. There's a whole series of commercials out there of sexy women in bikinis who are attracting their ideal man because they have good breath that they got from chewing gum. Lots of imaginative uses of that particular urge. The last three instinctual urges are a little less intuitive. The first one, curiosity, we talked about it a little bit, touched on it in Solving the Mystery as a storyline. Curiosity is the drive to understand the world and what's hidden. And it's a powerful urge. And it's also one of the most overused marketing strategies, as I mentioned before, for clickbait. So just be careful how you use it. Next is the urge for significance. It's a strong urge that's meaningless if the first 6 urges are not met to at least some minimum. You need a minimum of food, clothing, shelter, safety and protection, and arguably sex before you really start thinking about what makes your life significant. It begins to answer those existential questions such as, why do I exist, and is there meaning to life? There's many ways to incorporate a sense of significance into a storyline, and it's important to keep in mind that it's very future focused and generally a question asked by individuals who are a little older. You don't see a lot of teens and 20-somethings talking about significance. A little bit, but not nearly as much as someone who's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and up. And finally, spirituality. Anthropologists have data on human societies dating back thousands of years, and one of their commonalities is the idea of a spiritual world beyond this one. They've identified more than 4,000 distinct religions and more than 5,000 different gods. That's all through history. It's not just being practiced in the world today. The most important understanding for marketers are not the details of any one religion, but an understanding that people are called to the sublime. It's a driving urge that strongly influences decisions in many areas of life. It's not unusual for brands to tap spirituality as an urge by evoking images of beautiful destinations, and they highlight it with inspiring music and prose, and they're just trying to lift the spirit and connect you to whatever you think is sublime. And often it'll have a nature type theme. It doesn't have to. It can be powerfully used if done well. So moving on, those are the main steps to outline your story, define the tribe that you're going to tell it to and how you're going to pull them in, and then what emotions and what urges are you going to highlight in those storylines so that it really rings with the audience and has power for them. Okay, so these are our pillar page worksheets. So for those of you that are trying to add story into your websites, again, back to Google, okay, pillar page, it's a main idea, it's the main story about you're explaining something on an idea. We put this together just to help you start to outline it. your company, defining your tribe, choosing one of the archetypes that we just went over, and then what are some of the plots. Next, get to circle a couple of the urges, write a few sentences about how it might be used, how it applies to that audience, and as it relates to your brand. And then what are some of the emotions? And I listed out quite a few of the emotions. I think the majority of these are from the Stanford study. There's others out there. This is not all of them. In the Stanford study, what they were saying was these were the emotions they could prove exist by expressions on people's faces, but we know that there are more emotions than this. And keep in mind, emotions primarily occur in combination. Rarely are you going to feel just a single pure emotion. Rarely do you feel just fear or just straight happiness. Like as an example, when you graduate from high school or college or whatever your experience was, you were probably excited. You might have been relieved to be done with school, but maybe you're also a little fearful about the future and what was going to come next, and you're not really quite sure what to do. I know I sure was when I graduated college. And if you're a parent and your child has graduated high school, yeah, you're excited they're graduating high school, but you're also nervous they're going to college and they're leaving home. They're complex. We're complex creatures. So you're probably going to have 2, 3, as many as half a dozen emotions that you're going to incorporate into your copy. Okay, so next up, describing the story arc. And, what's the theme? What are those main points and important ideas that you're going to include in your storyline? What is it you're really trying to say? And you're going to outline that on your pillar page. Now, next up, what we're going to do now is brainstorm what additional content might I need to use to tell this story, and what supporting ideas are there. So like in Primal Storytelling, we just talked about urges and emotions and archetypes and narratives, and you might find, and you'll find these on our website, ideas about how to come up with a storyline. What kinds of content fails? Why do blogs fail? Those are related to the storylines. How do I create better headlines? That's something else that I might connect back to my pillar page. What are some things that I need to be careful of so that I don't overuse emotion? Those things. I'm going to brainstorm those. I'm going to have these out, and then I'm just going to come up with a topic idea for my next 6 pieces of content and link those back. These can be blogs. They can also be supporting social media posts. Lots and lots of ways you can use this and apply it to your story brand and to that primal storytelling. There's lots of ways you can apply this to your brand and tell their story in a primal way. Okay. So back to the viability quotient. It's a measure on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being low, 5 being high, and you're gonna rate each section of it. Tribe on 1 to 5, emotions, urges, and then the story itself. The higher the score, the more likely to receive comments and shares, and if your goal is to be viral, then really to go viral. Okay. The viability quotient, it's just a way of measuring how your content's doing. Each of the scores is subjective, but as you practice and you refine your scores, you'll begin to see how it predicts how the content will do, and it'll help you recognize what needs to be improved in the content. So if you have a few pieces that go out and they're not doing great, then you review them and you look back at the viability score that you gave them going in, you realize, okay, I need a little more emotion in some of these. I need to find that emotional hook. Then you at least now know that that's what you're missing. If you're consistently putting out content that's not too strong story-wise, then you can go back and you can reshape it. It's a way of measuring so that we can improve as we go forward. Okay, and that's the entire story Primal Storytelling methodology, very, very short, 30-minute version of it. So let's take some questions. I know you guys, I can't hear you. There's a lot of people on, so we had to mute everyone. I'm just going to look in the chat and pull some questions out. Okay, yep, here's the first one. Let me read it to you. Anthony, is there a difference between a B2B story and one that is B2C? Good question. I get this one a lot. They're fundamentally the same, and I covered this a little bit at the very beginning. We touched on it. When you're selling something to another business, there's not some artificially intelligent robot making the decision. There's a real life person or group of people making the decision. It's the same as B2C. People are making a purchasing decision. And, part of our goal of revolutionizing content is just this realization that people want more personalization and they want humanity. And we're going to use storytelling to do it. I hope that answers the question. So B2B, B2C, it's basically the same process because we're still telling stories to people. Okay, next one. Let's see. How do I choose what plot or archetype to use? How do I know which one is the best one? Yeah, the answer is there's not a best archetype or plot. We work on these full time. It's pretty much all that I do, and even with years of experience, we have to test. We have to see for sure what works with a certain audience. And I'm continuously surprised. Sometimes a campaign I'm not completely in love with will knock it out of the park. And other times when I feel confident we have a winner, it'll fall flat. I'm not psychic. We're not in the prediction business. Marketing, it requires trial. It requires, you got to recognize what's an error, what needs to be improved. You've got to test, and then you have to pivot. It's all part of that process. My best suggestion is, if you're going to do this yourself, pick an archetype and a plot structure that speaks to you, and then just go through the worksheets. Write the best story arc that you can write. You might surprise yourself. Test it out for 60 or 90 days. If it doesn't work, then you're going to go back to the drawing board and you're going to do it again. There is a storyline that will work for you, and testing is the only way you're going to know for sure what works. If you're having a hard time with it, then give us a call. We can take you through the entire process, give you a storytelling kickstart. That's what we do. I think one of the biggest fears that people have is the blank page. Getting started can be hard. You just have to be brave and give it a shot. Use the worksheets as best you can and write your own story. If it doesn't work out the way you wanted, write another story and keep going until you have the right one that does the work. And of course, you can always choose to take a shortcut. We got to give ourselves a little plug. Give us a call. We'll put you on the fast track to create a primal story for your brand. And our hope is that that'll take your digital marketing to the next level. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me directly. It's anthony@candoideas.com. Just anthony@candoideas.com. I answer all my own emails still. It might take me a couple days, but I'll get back to you. I'll answer you. For those of you who'd like access to the worksheets, if you're on the live webinar, they'll arrive in the follow-on emails. You'll get those in the next couple days. If you're watching a recorded version of this webinar and you'd like the tools, just email me, anthony@candoideas.com. I'll send you the link. You can give them a try. I'm happy to help, and I hope you all have a good storytelling experience. I thank you all for coming, and I hope your stories help you change the world. All right, this is Anthony Butler. I'm the CEO of Can Do Ideas and the founder of and creator of Primal Storytelling methodology. Hey, take care.